Well, welcome back to another session. I I hope you're well, and as always, I'm pleased to have you join me again. Now, today I am going to be discussing a follow up to a conversation that I started yesterday regarding the concept of cheating and infidelity. I discussed what I consider to be the part one to the whole concept of cheating. Obviously, I did not complete the conversation as indicated before I started. The second part has to do with infidelity, with some remnants of cheating, and much more. Now, in today's session, I have titled today's session Infidelity and Much Ado About Nothing. Now, let that title sink. Infidelity and much ado about nothing. Now, back in the 16th century, William Shakespeare produced a play. And in the play, he titled the play Much Ado About Nothing. And it's been with us ever since. Most people remember that play title, and we use it in general conversation when we want to refer to things that we think are simply so trivial, so not worthy of our time, energy, resources, and perhaps things that should be, disregarded, to pay no heed to. I would put infidelity and cheating within the same category when dealing with the complaints that women put forward about infidelity and cheating with regards to men. I am going to explain my reasons. My reasons are my reasons. Let me make that very clear. In the sessions that perhaps follow, I will address infidelity and cheating with regards to a man's perspective. But for this particular occasion, similar to the previous one yesterday, I'm focusing on infidelity, and perhaps with the view of sharing and informing and equipping women with the knowledge that perhaps they should have but do not have. In the session yesterday, I stated, and let me reiterate that statement for the purpose of those who are snowflakes and perhaps who bought into this silly ideology of meism and almost narcissistic in their outlook and beliefs, such that they think if anything offends their feelings, that such a thing is wrong, and that feelings and their feelings represent the center of the universe. No, I really do not care. I'm not speaking from a position of morality. This is an amoral conversation. We've done such a huge disservice to people in the West, so much so that we don't actually think the way we used to think about simple things. The idea that we are trying to argue with biology and nature is just absurd. I have no appetite for, and I have no tolerance for such trivial matters. So keep that in mind. This is an amoral position. I'm not making a value judgment. I really do not care. I'm simply trying to share words of understanding that could help women. And if I sat here with my daughter and I was trying to teach her about men, I would say exactly the same thing. So I'm speaking to you as I would a daughter, as I would a sister, as I would a friend, and even as I would someone who perhaps I care about very dearly. How you can, and the purpose is how to equip you with the necessary knowledge you need, and understanding so that you can manage the troubled times, because they will come. Now, you might be young and hot, and you don't think about cheating and infidelity and all of that shenanigans. Or you might be, let's say, youthful, middle age. It will come. You will come to what I call your moments of temptations, a moment of tests and tribulations. Now, how you overcome those will depend on how prepared you are. Consider this a preparation test. Again, not a moral conversation and not a value judgment. I really do not care. Now, let me start with an example. Think about a jungle. Life is like a jungle. We begin in one place, one location, and for the most part, we are trying to travel from A to B to get from one side to the other side. Along the way, we make choices and decisions, and those choices and decisions we make will come with costs, consequences, constraints, and trade-offs. So we have to be responsible. In any case, we decide to go from A to the other side of the jungle, which is B. Now, sometimes it is boring to travel or to journey alone. And along the way, we might meet other people who may have a similar vision to us to get to the other side. And we might convince them to join us, to partner with us, and to trust us, to trust our leadership as men in going from A to B. If we are successful in convincing the opposite sex, then we have a helpmeet, someone who is journeying with us across the other side. That is supposed to be life. If we get there successfully, we are happy. We journey from Egypt all the way to, firstly, through the Red Sea, into the desert, through the River Jordan, into the Promised Land. That is the concept of life for most people. Along the way, we have our challenges and our moments. One of such issues will come relationally, and often it presents itself as in the following form. Well, I decided to join your vision and journey with you from A to B, but along the way, you got distracted. And now I look around and I look back and I see that in addition to myself and my offsprings, there are other people following you. And we are now journeying to the other side. And you, the man, you've broken your promises. You've cheated. I'll deal with that in the sessions, or in what I will call the chapters to follow. In any case, think about that concept. It makes for a vivid impression, because we can sit back on the screen of our imagination and we can understand. We can even remember films. Now, a useful movie is the Last of the Mohicans. Daniel Day-Lewis played a fascinating role in what I think is one of the greatest movies of all times. And in one particular scene, we have a surrender of one group to another, and as part of the surrender agreement, the victory, or those who were victorious, say, well, we will let you journey from A to B. You have our word. We will let you, if you drop your weapons and hand over the fortress, the real estate, you can go freely. And you can go from A to B back to your land. Now, it was primarily a setup. In any case, what we found was an army of people, a group of people, choosing to move from one point to the other in the jungle, recognizing that they would meet obstacles, challenges, bad actors, and opportunities that perhaps will threaten their very existence. Most of them died in that jungle. Only a few survived. That's life. So I like to put things in perspective. The reason I use those two examples, the jungle and The Last of the Mohicans, is to put things in perspective. So you as a woman, as you label and as you make noise and as you attempt to destroy your entire life and as you look to break your family up for something so trivial as infidelity or cheating, put things in perspective. There was a time when you were simply happy to be around someone who could journey with you across to the other side. Fear of your life, fear of making it safely, fear of actually being attacked, raped, fear of actually being mauled over by the lions. The importance of the group was important. Now, I'm going to address how civilization has caused us to be very ungrateful. I mean, absolutely ungrateful. Again, not a moral argument about whether cheating or infidelity is right or wrong. I'm simply saying, put things in perspective and think about what you are losing by your actions. There's a saying, well, the person who throws dust in the wind, in a wind blowing in their direction, gets so much more of the dust than the person they're trying to throw the dust on. Most people, as a result of infidelity or cheating, make irrational decisions that are incredibly idiotic. Now, what is sad is that those decisions are supported by the group, the friends, primarily women. Now, let me move to the second chapter of today's session. I talked about the importance of getting to the other side. Let me talk about what I call the life cycle of a woman and the life cycle of a man. Now, both life cycles have some similarities as follows. We are born, and from the day we are born, we start to die, and eventually we meet our death. We age. The aging process is the one constant denominator, that as the day goes by, we are getting older and we are deteriorating, and similar to buildings, we are dilapidating, and unfortunately, we're depreciating on an age-related basis. We're getting weaker and less strong. As a man ages, what he finds is that the things that he once loved, he begins to loathe. And as a woman ages, she finds also that the things she once loved, perhaps she begins either to loathe, and the things she once hated or found irritating, she realizes that perhaps they are not as important as she ages. I'm going to give you a few dates. Now, since I'm speaking to the women, I'm going to address the women specifically. Your tolerance for infidelity and cheating should mirror a life cycle path or diagram. The younger you are, the less tolerant you should be about infidelity and cheating. And I'll do my best to explain why. The older you get, the wiser you should become, and therefore the more tolerant you should be, and more careful about your irrational responses to infidelity and cheating. Let me explain why. I'm going to begin from 18 now. The UK has just passed the legislation that says that the minimum age for consent for marriage, civil partnerships, is 18. No longer 16 and 17. You have to be 18 years. So we start with 18. 5 years, 18 to 22. Stage 1. 23 to 27. Stage 2, another 5 years. 27 to 32. Third stage, another 5 years. Then we see a blip, a short period, 32 to 35. Geriatric pregnancy, high-risk pregnancy begins at the end. 3 years. 36 until 40. 5 years. 40 to 45, 5 years. 45 to 50, 5 years. 50 and above. Now, for most women, 18 all the way up to 35, you have 18 years when you have to make the most important decisions that are necessary in accordance with your biology and the time restrictions that nature affords you as a woman. Painful to accept from a man, especially coming from a young man, but true nonetheless. The younger you are, the more you should be aware of some of these matters so that you don't make the same mistakes that older women are making. Now, one of my observations about women in the West, particularly middle-aged women and older women, from baby boomers up until the present generation, women do a huge disservice to younger women in not reinvesting a life lived with all of its pains and successes and adventures and lessons, refusing to reinvest that smartly in the younger ones. We encourage the younger girls not to learn, not to compromise, to be as stubborn as the older women were. Very wrong. Very, very wrong. The area of infidelity and cheating is the one area that there is almost a unanimous position amongst women from 18 upwards. The only time you see a separation is when you get to people who are 70 years and above. Now, those who are 70 years and above, if you look at their birth timeline, they tend to fall within those who are more the great generation. Now, those who are 80 and above and more, 90, fall into the silent generation. And they view life very differently. But from the baby boomers up until this generation, women have misled and done a poor service of educating younger girls on how to make important strategic decisions, especially with regards to getting from one part of the jungle to the other safely. Now, with that said, let me go back to the life cycle of a woman. I said, the younger you are, the less tolerant you should be about infidelity and cheating. The older you get, the more accepting, the wiser you should become, the more willing you should be able to negotiate and place what is important in the right locations. 18 to 22 is the peak of a woman's youth and beauty. If you were to poll men between 18 years and up to 55, and this has been done across several countries, across several geographies, what we find, and across several ethnicities, what we find is that men generally in that group say that women between the age of 21 and 23, 24 are the most desirable. So what you find is actually 18, men consider you to be white, whilst you will still have purity and youth and beauty and attractiveness. They still consider you to be a baby, but they give you time, 5 years. At the end of the 5th year, you become 20, on your 22nd birthday, from then on, you are the most desirable on average. But the first 5 years, a woman is at the peak of her, you might say, purity and chastity. Therefore, you should not tolerate infidelity for a simple reason that you have the highest value at that point in time. In the marketplace, men choose women and we rank women on 4 criteria. 3 are what we base our decisions on. There is a 4th, but very few men consider that at all, if ever. The first is your sexual marketplace value, and this has to do with purely how attractive you are. Height to weight ratio, height to waist ratio, facial features, your level of attractiveness, whether you're fit in terms of healthy, whether you have good fitness in terms of aesthetics, and whether your well-being is consistent with your looks. It's a purely visual thing, purely visual. The second is your reproductive fertility value, your ability to reproduce for and bring his seed into the next generation, or carry his seed into the next generation. So your reproductive fertility value is effectively linked to your age and the quality and quantity of eggs you have, which is also linked to your age. The third is what I call your non-sexual marketplace value. And this is an umbrella, a basket that captures several things. Your attitude. In many ways, I call it your self-image, your A, B to Z of self-image. But let me give you some of what is included. Your attitude, your behavior, your communication, your digital avatar, your femininity, how humble you are, how kind you are. But it goes into other parts. Your mannerisms, your etiquettes, your decorum, whether you were trained to be a wife, whether you were prepared for wifely duties or even prepared for motherhood. Here is where servanthood comes into the picture. Your presence. All of that we put into the category of things that are not linked to your physical attributes alone and are not linked to your biological imperative as a woman, and therefore are simply attitudinal. Your attitude, the choices you made, your training, etc. Those are the three things men judge women based on. So number one, when we talk about cheating, you have to distinguish very carefully what marketplace you find yourself. There are two marketplaces predominantly, dating and relationship. The dating marketplace is short term. Men are there primarily for sex. So the idea that a woman says, well, I started dating this man and he cheated, is absurd. There is no cheating when you're dating. Zero. Until there's been a promise of significance offered to you, either through marriage or civil partnership or a cohabitation agreement, you have nothing. There is no agreement. You are simply in the marketplace for sex. Now, you might be intimate with someone and you might be emotionally connected to someone, but you have nothing. Both of you owe each other nothing. You are simply dating. Cheating applies only to people who are in a significant, emotionally profound and legally connected, bound, or a legal derivative type agreement, marriage, cohabitation, civil partnership, or similar. Those are the people for whom infidelity and cheating apply. With everyone else, shut the F up. Grow up. If I were to meet you and I start playing, dating, hanging out with you for a week, it doesn't matter how intimate we become, and it doesn't matter how in love you become with me, I owe you nothing, and you owe me nothing. Now, this does not mean that I'm trying to discount what I call the rules of engagement, the decorum. This does not mean I'm trying to engage and remove the precepts and the norms and the behaviors and the principles and the traditions and the values of courting someone or dating someone. Now, I'm going to address that when I deal with the gifts that we've received from feminism, which is the next chapter. In any case, in the first marketplace, which is dating, cheating, infidelity doesn't apply. Zero. In the second marketplace, which is the relationship marketplace, which is where people come to meet other people, to have a profound relationship of some significance, however they define that. And in this marketplace, even if it hasn't advanced to the position where there is an agreement, there may have been a conversation, an exchange of words, a clarification of desires, seeking for confirmation of what both parties want. I call this herds of terms. Now, I'll deal with this later. It's a business terminology. I'll talk about this later. HOT. If you haven't discussed the HOTs, even if you are in the relationship marketplace, it is not cheating. Now, even if you are married, you're cohabiting with someone, you're in a civil partnership with someone, if you have not discussed your HOT, your herds of terms, it is not cheating. Infidelity does not apply. In other words, for something to exist, the word has to become flesh first. You have to get out of your thoughts and your feelings and allow those thoughts to manifest itself, to clothe itself in the physical plane of consciousness. We call those words. If words have not been spoken, either through questions, through probing, or through a declaration, or through a contract, there is no cheating or infidelity. Now, I'll make some concession about the relationship marketplace, but let me go back. I'm talking about the life cycle of a woman. You have to understand that the younger you are, the more likely you will be in the dating marketplace. So 18 to 22, you're most likely dating. For most women, 22 to 27, they're most likely dating. You shouldn't be talking about infidelity or cheating. Now, as you move across hierarchies or across stages, you come into your womanhood. But here is what's sad, and this is a reality. Young women, you have to understand this. And I do not say this to hurt you, and I do not say this to harm you. I say this because if you understand this knowledge, you can help avoid pain, maximize your pleasure, and minimize any discomfort and making bad decisions. This is all about making good decisions. The younger you are, the more you have more of what men want. Irrespective of whether the man is in the marketplace for sex, the dating marketplace, or the marketplace for relationship, the relationship marketplace, men, generally speaking, choose women based purely first on visuals, what we see. Therefore, your sexual marketplace value is what we judge you based on. You can have the most beautiful face, but if you're overweight, that affects your value, your visual value. It means we find you less attractive, all things remaining equal. The younger you are, the more you have youth on your side, and therefore, the more attractive you are. Age plays a huge role. The older you get, the less of what men want you have. Let me say it more eloquently. As you age, and as you get older as a woman, you have less of what we want as men, which is beauty, youth, fertility, attractiveness, playfulness, youthfulness. You have less of that. Men also have the same thing because we're aging. But, and this is a distinction that is important, women are therefore objects from a man's perspective, just in the same way that men are objects in a woman's eyes. The idea that women should not be objectified is preposterous. It's fanciful. It's almost bordering on lunacy. Men, we are resource objects. We are judged based on our ability to produce. Women, you are sexual objects. Men see you as objects of beauty. Things we want to be around. Things we are attracted to. Therefore, the younger you are, the more you have more of what men want, and as you age, you lose that attractiveness to men. This would mean simply that a woman who is 25 is more attractive to her 35-year-old self, who is more attractive to her 45-year-old self, who is more attractive to her 55-year-old self, to all men in the marketplace, all things remaining equal. Women, you cannot compete with time. You just cannot. On beauty and youth and attractiveness, you just cannot. So as you age, what you find is you lose what you have. So for example, a woman who is 22 has, in this case, 100%, if we use that, or 99%, 95% of her sexual marketplace value. But unfortunately, by 36, she probably has 70% of that left. Sorry, she's lost 75% of that and therefore has about 25% of that left. And this does not mean she goes from being a 9 to a 3. No, it just simply means that you plateau, you get to 35 and 36. You're now in high risk pregnancy. And for men who are looking to go from just purely dating and transition to marriage, they have to question themselves as to whether you can bring to term their genes in a sufficient quantity in a safe manner. So you might be a 9 at 25. You might still be a 6 or 5 at 37. You may not dip below a 7 because you will still be an attractive woman, and most people are average, but most men will not desire you for anything beyond ejaculation and sex. For men who want to have families, they would rather choose your younger self because your younger self has that value. It's a combination of your sexual marketplace value and your reproductive fertility value. And the reason I say that is simple. What we have found and what we see in the West is an inverted approach to what should be common sense. We have younger girls at 18, 19, 20, 21, despite having their purity, chastity, youth, beauty, attractiveness, are accepting and are acceptant of cheating. Most young women today will say, well, I know he has a few girlfriends, but I like him, so it's fine. And as these women get older, they become less tolerant. They get to the 30s, mid-30s, and 37, 38, and they say, I will not tolerate cheating whatsoever. It's almost as though it's some cognitive dissonance, almost a mental block. How is it possible that when you had your highest value, you were not aware of your value and you accepted infidelity, but when you have your lowest value, you refuse to accept infidelity or cheating? Now, I'm not suggesting you accept it or you disregard them. I don't really care. I'm simply saying women are losing in the West simply because you guys have been trained and brainwashed into thinking that you are like men. Now, the fourth way of estimating one's value proposition is what we call the economic intrinsic value. Men do not use this for judging women. This has to do with your education, your success from a career perspective, your wealth, your income, your net worth. Most men do not care what you studied, where you studied, what you earn, how much money you save, how much money you invest, partly because your money is your money, and most men come to the table hoping to be the providers. And women are very guarded about their wealth. Therefore, you administer that wealth as a wealth manager for yourself, whereas I administer my wealth as a wealth manager for both of us and the rest of the family. So men do not judge women based on education, but women in the West have been trained, educated to think that the more knowledge they acquire, the more their value increases. It's an asymmetric thought process. Now, I can see the mistake because feminism has taught women, you're just like men, you're the same, there's no difference. Now, this is where I introduce men. Men are judged primarily as resource objects. Therefore, we are judged based on our economic intrinsic value first, and everything else is a bonus. And this is partly why you can see a very wealthy man who is very unattractive, sexual marketplace value, and who is 59 or 58, 60, which means he has no intentions of reproducing, 0 reproductive fertility value, and, to put it mildly, has no mannerisms. At the dinner table, he eats like an animal. No mannerism. So his non-sexual marketplace value, his attitude, his behavior, his communication is awful. But he has a lot of money and therefore he overcompensates. Women accept him. Why? Because predominantly men, we are resource objects. So we are judged primarily on our economic intrinsic value. Women will tolerate a man with a high EIV and a low SMV, RFV, and NSMV, because what matters is provision, protection, and a future for the woman. I explain this difference so you can understand that from a man's perspective, we are not looking for similarity of similarity in attraction. We are trading our resources for your beauty, for your youth, for your chastity, for your attractiveness. It's a cross trade. It's effectively, it's a very classic example of trade by barter. You have something I want, I have something you want, and we're going to exchange. And the exchange has to be fairly equal, or considered to be in good faith, and therefore an equal exchange. Until women in the West stop thinking that what they bring to the table is how intelligent they are, and how educated they are, and how much money they make, and how much wealth they have, or what their parents have as wealth, you will always fail. Why? Because you will be bringing to the table, to the value proposition wise, your value offer will be the same as a man. Now think about this logically. You don't have to think about this from an intersexual dynamics perspective. If I have a sheep and I'm tired of eating sheep every day, I have a farm and I have sheep, and I'm tired of having lamb every day, tired of killing my sheep and having lamb for dinner. And I think to myself, I just love a lovely steak, a ribeye steak. Now, I have a choice. I can take one of my sheep across to the other side, to the other farmer, and I can say, listen, you have some cow. Can I exchange some lamb for some of your beef? If on the other hand, I walk to the other side and the farmer there doesn't have any cows, and all he has or she has is sheep, then they have exactly what I want. So there is no exchange. There is no need for exchange. In relationships, until women understand that what they bring is everything other than your economic intrinsic value, you will have very, very little success in the exchange proposition. Men will always come with the EIV, resources. Women therefore have to come with your sexuality, your beauty, your youth, and your fertility. Most importantly, for men who want long-term relationships and a family, the need for you to be well trained for both being a wife and being a mother becomes more important. Now, I've gone through that just to explain. As you age, you should tolerate and be aware of how infidelity is much ado about nothing, because your value is lower, which is the same reason why, for a man, the younger we are, the less we have of the resources that women want. So younger men are more tolerant of infidelity than they are as they age. Very simple. And here is a useful way of keeping count. We use the same age groups. 18 to 22, the woman has the highest value. 18 to 22, a man of the same age has his lowest value because he has just potential. No resources, no ability yet, no wealth, just potential. So his value is the lowest. So the younger the man is, if he was dating a girl who was of the same group, he has less to negotiate and trade. Therefore, the idea of, from a dating perspective, infidelity should be more tolerable for a younger man because he has nothing. In many ways, she gifts him the highest honor because he has nothing and she has everything, which is partly why you see young men who are in that age group, when they are dating women who are in the same age group, they are ecstatic. Why? They cannot believe that the woman is actually accepted to give to them the most important thing she has, which is her beauty, her youth, her time, her fertility. The boys are ecstatic. They walk around thinking, I've just won a lottery. I'm a millionaire. Walk into an environment with young boys, 18 to 22, and have those same boys date women in the same group. And you see that the confidence those boys have is similar to the confidence a young man in his late 30s who is a millionaire has. He understands that he won. He has the virgin's prize, and he sometimes has the virgin. The man who's 35 has labored for 16, 18, 20 years to be able to afford the resources to come to the table and negotiate with the woman for her virginity or her value. Whereas if she decides that I like the young boy and I give it to him, the young boy wins. Which is why young men can walk around with a chip on their shoulders. Why? Because although they had nothing to give in exchange, the woman bestowed upon them the highest honor. But as the man transitions across the life cycle and goes from 23 to 27, he starts to acquire more knowledge, more education, and therefore his potential starts to materialize. When he hits 27 to 30 plus, his tolerance for infidelity starts to shift. Now I say to young men, until you get to 35, you're not ready. 5% of your time should be spent on relationships, which would mean that most of your time you don't have and you cannot afford to risk, to burn on the altar of sex and sexual gratification, your purpose, your vision, your mission. 5% of your time could be interacting with women, 95% of your time, your purpose, your mission, wealth, creating a future, and staying focused. Now, this would simply mean that you remain in the dating marketplace, and therefore, from a man's perspective, there is no such thing as infidelity because you owe him nothing. And he's asked and he's come to the table offering you nothing. The idea of infidelity for people who are just dating is just stupid, just very silly, which means the younger the woman is. And what a man who is 29, who's dating a woman who's 21, it would be insane for that woman to tolerate infidelity from the man who is 29. But in the same way, it would be stupid of the man who is 29 to focus on the whole idea of infidelity, because she at 21 should be seeking out the most important suitors, the most important offers, which would mean, unfortunately, because we've actually given up the virgin's prize, she will be giving herself to people to find out who will bid the highest. But if his focus and his purpose, and if only 5% of his time is invested in relationships, it wouldn't make a difference, because he knows all I have to do is wait until 35, and then I can choose, because then I can afford that price. Now, I've explained this much longer than I would have wanted. In any case, let me move to chapter 4, which is where I talk about feminism and the gift of feminism. Now, what I have explained in part 3 is not difficult to understand or master. But from about the 60s and 70s, an ideology came into the West. Feminism at its root cause, we talk about the suffragettes in the UK, and these were great women who fought for choice. It's primarily choice. I like the choice to be able to, as a human being, treated as someone who can decide what they want. I support that. Like all good things, if allowed to go beyond their natural limits, will develop into monsters. And then we then transition from choice to equality, which was fine, because the first equality was equality under the law, and that was fine. And then it was equality as human beings, fine. Equality in the right to vote, fine. Equality of opportunities, absolutely. Now, it became an issue when we got to the third wave, which is equality of outcomes. And so much so that most women have been brainwashed into thinking that you were just like men. I spent the first 2 chapters talking about the jungle and getting to the other side, and then the life cycle of human beings. But at the core, what you find is the ideology that came with womanism, feminism, and all that nonsense caused women to let go of what was their most honorable value, which is their chastity, virginity, decorum, and purity, and to toss all of that away and behave like men. Useless, not trustworthy, not worthy of actually waiting for, and behaving in manners that were just, that defied logic. They encourage women to see the sexual liberation as something empowering. You know, I've never seen or heard of anything so evil. You take a woman who is a virgin and you say, your virginity, which is purity, chastity, youth, beauty, means nothing. So at the most highest point in time when your value is the highest, you should spread it out to every man and have fun and enjoy yourself and emancipate yourself. And women chose that. And what they found, they went mano a mano with men, and they realized that we are biologically different. We're not the same. A man can have sex with 10 women, and it means nothing to him. Because when we have sex, we don't do so emotionally, most of the time. Whereas women, you connect emotionally in the act of intimacy or sex. And what it's shown is that in the West, most women are damaged with this sexual liberation. There is something wrong. In any case, the ideology of feminism was the best gift to men. Why? What used to be applicable to the classes, those with wealth and resources, has now become available to the classes. Everybody is talking about infidelity. There was a time when infidelity was left to the kings and the barons. It was left to those with wealth, influence, money, power. Today, the boy next door, who has nothing, expects to have 2 or 3 women at the same time. The question is why? Well, the virgin's price, which is the highest price a man could offer to a woman, has been reduced to swipe left or swipe right. People are having sex today before they actually get to know each other, before they go on a formal date. I can pull up a device, I can download an application, and here's the guarantee. If I allowed myself a few minutes, this is really sad, a few minutes on the same application, I will find someone who will be willing to have sex with me within a few minutes. All I have to do is either obtain a location or give my location. We've created this liberal mindset and pathway towards sexuality, so much so that sex has no value. So when women who are in the West talk about infidelity and cheating, I laugh because my question is simple. This is the world you fought for. This is your creation. Men cannot ask for what you do not give. The reason men can go from one partner to another is because there is another woman on the other side. If women decided that they wanted to clean up the whole act and behave like ladies and behave like women and stop behaving like drunken sailors, as men do, the whole idea of infidelity and promiscuity and cheating will be out of the window. The wealthy people who had the resources always had multiple wives, concubines and side wives, and you had a main wife and you had other wives. They could afford it because they were resource objects. Those who were the peasants could not. But here is the issue. When you drop the cost of sex to 0, then it means everybody can afford it. It becomes open to the masses. And therefore you cannot complain. One of the unintended consequences of the liberal sexual revolution promoted by the feminists was infidelity, cheating, promiscuity, lack of trust, and what I call the revolution of pleasure. Some people call it hedonism, hedonistic choices. I don't really care. This is an amoral conversation. It's not a value judgment. I don't care. Now, this brings me to a very important part of the conversation, which I think I will use as a way of bringing together today's session to a close. And that is simple. What is cheating? What is infidelity? Let me use an example that I think most people might relate to. One of the greatest investors of all time, certainly in the last century, is Warren Buffett, the CEO and chairman of Berkshire Hathaway, and his partner, Charlie Munger, two people I admire and always have. Warren Buffett, at certain stages across the past 70 years, has been amongst the wealthiest men in the world. Certain times he was the wealthiest man in the world, and certain times he's been in the top 10, sometimes in the top 5, but certainly one of the wealthiest. Now, he came up with something which he called a pledge. He said he was going to give away 99.9% of his wealth. Now, he's worth hundreds of billions, but all of that wealth will be given away within a specific time after his death, during his lifetime, and within a specific time after his death, I think about 10 years. That's one important information to put to the side. Warren has been obsessed about investing from a young man. And the biography of his life and his conversations, and even conversations by his children, said very clearly that he was never present as a father because he was always working. That they were primarily raised by their mother. He was a good father, but he loved investing so much that he was almost never around. That their mother, did most of the heavy lifting. She did the nurturing and the raising, taking them to school, etc. Now, they loved their fathers. In one of the documentaries, the daughter speaks very, very fondly of her father, but says, we never saw him. He came around, came back home, came downstairs to have his dinner, went straight back up to his office, and was always there. So we never had the time. We never actually got to spend time with him as much as we would have loved. Now, keep a few things in mind because I'm going to connect the dots. Very important. I talked about his wealth and how he was going to give away all of his wealth, not to his children or his loved ones, but to strangers for good cause. 99.9%. So the first thing I want you to keep in mind is resources. Number 2, time. His time was spent purely within the field of investing. Number 3, because he was never around, his words and his vision was never given to his loved ones as much as they would have wanted. He wasn't there playing with his kids on the floor and running around with them. That was for mum. His role was to provide for the family, and he spent all of his time working. Resources, time, words, and number 4 is his heart. Warren Buffett tells you, and says even till today, at 93 years old, will tell you that the most important thing in his life is his painting. In other words, his investing, his masterpiece, what he has created as a business. And that is where his heart is. Now, for more than 40 years or 50 years, he has made it very clear, I'm not interested in financial wealth for myself. I am only interested in growing the wealth of my investors. And that's where my heart is. So he has been completely dedicated from almost an intimate perspective with the art of investing and doing well by his business. He loves his business. He loves the art of investing, and he loves making money. 4 things: resources, time, words, and his heart. Warren's behavior was so strong that when his children got to a certain age, old enough, 18, his wife left. She left the house and moved to another state. Why? She did not feel wanted. because Warren was self-sufficient with his joy and the blissful interaction he had with investing. Now, he remarried, but it's not part of the story. The point being, 4 things. Now, those 4 things, I'm going to show you how those 4 things form the basis of any conversation about cheating or infidelity. I'm going to define cheating from a man's perspective, and I'm going to show you how you should think about cheating if you are a woman. A lot of mistakes are made. Women say, and this is the definition of infidelity and cheating: if the man is having sexual relations or intimacy with another woman. Now, let me, from a man's perspective, we are resource objects. And in the first session, I talked about the importance of understanding the value of integrity and character, and that a man's presence, a man's words, and a man's resources or productions from his hands should be one. The early writers say, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one." Integrity. The Trinity, one. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, one. My words will not return back to me void. It would accomplish that to which it has been sent. The moment a king speaks, he becomes limited by his words, because his word is him or her, if she's a queen. So a king's presence, in other words, a king's resources, a king's words, and a king's presence, and a king's heart, one. So to judge cheating from a man's perspective, you have to look at those 4 things. Now, can you see the absurdity going back to Warren Buffett? If his wife said, well, he's cheating with his business. He's cheating on me with his business because all of his resources are not coming to the family or the kids. He's giving it all away. All of his time is spent purely on business and investing. All of his thoughts and his presence is spent in the office. All of his time in the office is always thinking about business and investing. So he's cheating on me. Can you see the absurdity of that statement? That is the same statement women make. Take away Warren Buffett, put a woman, Sam, and Susan. Susan makes the same comment about Sam with regards to his movements. Now, women generally say a man cheats from a sexual perspective. I'm going to suggest something that perhaps is counterintuitive, but I hope you take it if you are a woman. A man having sex with another woman when he is in a relationship with you is not infidelity or cheating if it's purely sex. The question is whether there's intimacy, and most importantly, whether he gives her any of the following: his resources, his presence, and his presence meaning professing and the priestly duties, his purpose and his future, and his time. So a man cheats with his resources. If he's providing the same level of support and provision, and he provides that to another woman, yeah, that's wrong. If he does that, again, intimately, he's in love with another woman, just as he is with you, yeah, I'll listen to that conversation about infidelity. But if you came to me and said purely he's having sex with another woman, well, remember, you are sexual objects. We are resource objects. So if you had sex with another man, you're cheating. If I give out our resources to another woman, I'm cheating. If you spend time with another man, interacting in whatever level, physical, spiritual, emotional, mental, you're cheating. Because you cannot love 2 men at the same time. Women are not built that way. I can love 10 women at the same time. Men are built that way. You can have sex with 2 people, but be intimately connected to both. The man can have sex with multiple women and not be intimately connected to any. A woman can have a husband, have sex with other men, generally speaking, all things remaining equal, she can't come back and respect and love and admire her husband. A man can have a wife, go out into the marketplace and have sex with 100 women and come back and love his wife. We are different. That's the important statement. Men and women are different. And until women start to separate this feminist ideology that teaches young women that men and women are the same, women will always find challenges in their relationships. You always find problems in your relationships until you start behaving intelligently. Now, at the core of this difference is a word: double standards. There are double standards that benefit men. There are double standards that benefit women. I don't care how you feel about double standards. Take it up with your creator if you believe in one. I'm reminded by a joke. Two guys having a conversation, and the first person says one is a Christian and the other one is an atheist. And the atheist says to the Christian, "Don't tell me you believe all this silly stories about Jonah in the belly of the whale, having been swallowed by a whale. Don't tell me you believe that nonsense." And the Christian says, "Well, I do. It's part of my faith, I do." And the atheist says, "Well, how are you going to prove it?" And the Christian thinks and says, "Well, I can't prove it in this life, but when I get to heaven, I'll ask God and I'll ask Jonah." And the atheist snickers and smirks and smiles and he says, "Well, what if you don't find Jonah in heaven?" And the Christian looks at the atheist and says, "Well, then you can ask him." Now, I hope you get the logic of that joke, because if you don't, perhaps it's gone past you. Listen to this again, and perhaps you understand. The point being, this is not about how you feel, but I would encourage you to learn this lesson, that there are double standards. Some double standards benefit men and some double standards benefit women. The double standard that benefit men are that we are resource objects and we choose women. We choose women based on what we find desirable: beauty, youth, attractiveness, chastity. And on the other hand, women choose us based on resources. So a woman who's 25 says, "Well, I command the highest value because I am presently at my peak value." And men have to say, "Fine, no problem. We'll go out to the marketplace and we will try to find something, and we exchange, solve problems for the world and exchange our potential for value. And when we can afford you, we'll come back." Double standards exist. So the double standard that a man can have sex with multiple women and it's not cheating exists. But it is a double standard because women cannot do the same thing. And it's purely based on your nature, purely based on your biology. But primarily, one of the fundamental issues has to do with the historical issue with identifying paternity. If a woman has multiple sex partners, if you exclude all the technology that we have developed in the past 40, 50 years, it became very hard to determine who the father was. The woman always knew that it was her child because she birthed the child. The 10 men who may have had sex with her could not tell. The only way we determined paternity was through exclusivity, which is where the virgin prize was required. That I knew that I'm the only man who has been with my wife, and therefore the child is mine. I don't have to do a test because it is mine. Because men cannot detect paternity without tests, we don't know. We have to wait for many years to see if the child looks like us. And therefore, intrinsically in every man's innate makeup is that we do not like promiscuous women. So I'm going to connect this to something important, which is those who understand the legal case in the UK will be familiar with the difference between a civil and a criminal case. Let me give you a good example. Let's say this mouse, I wanted to sell it to you. And I presented it to you for sale, and I described the mouse very carefully. And my written description did not match up with the actual description when you receive the goods. Then we have something called the Goods Act, which effectively guarantees or says, well, what you've described, there shouldn't be a missale. What you've described should be consistent with what you have actually sold. Now, if there is any discrepancy, the area of discrepancy falls into one of many categorizations. If I come and I say, well, this is a missale, it's not consistent. Now, it will fall within what we call a civil case, in which case I can go to a county court. In a civil case, the judge will simply say, well, was it misrepresentation, negligence, or was it just perhaps a mistake by the seller? It doesn't do away with the fact that there is a separation between, a difference between what was written and what was sold. But they categorize that into groups. It could be an honest mistake. For example, during the delivery, it got damaged. Honest mistake. It could also be negligence, meaning you sold it but you didn't include a battery, and therefore I paid for a battery. Negligence. On the other hand, if I, the seller, intentionally intended to mislead, and I planned to mislead, for example, I provided a warranty statement or a documentation with this, or there was evidence to show that I actually tampered with this material, so much so that I was actually trying to commit fraud, to mislead. Or for example, if I provided statements that showed that I manipulated the description, for example, an authentication document that says this is actually a mouse and it is the legitimate copy. If documents come and are presented and I give it to someone who's a forensic investigator and they say, no, do you know, this is actually a fake document and it's been manipulated and it's been changed and it's been modified to present this product as a legitimate document, that case transfers from the civil court to the criminal court because fraud. Now, what separates both is the word intention to mislead. Now, you might be thinking, what does this have to do with intersectory dynamics? Well, it has everything to do with what I have been talking about so far. When a man actually is in a relationship with another woman, because there is a separation in our makeup between our genitals and our self, men are more similar to animals than women are to animals. Innately, we are animals, both of us, both sexes are, but men are more similar to animals. The act of sex for men is like an exercise. Ejaculation is like taking a piss, it's like urination. We do not associate emotions to that, which is why you could have a man wake up in the morning, have sex with his missus, go to work, have the opportunity to sleep with his secretary in the office. He would do it. Goes to the gym in the afternoon. After the yoga class, something happens with the instructor. He nails her on the studio floor, leaves there on his way home, providing he has the energy, bumps into another woman in the pub. They kick it off. He nails her at 7:30 p.m., goes back home, has dinner with his wife, as though nothing happened, nails her at 9 p.m. and goes to sleep. Why? There is no emotion, with the exception of his wife. All the others were simply taking a piss. That's a civil case. We don't plan. We might even take steps to plan, to execute the process, but there is no emotion. Women, on the other hand, because of your makeup and your emotional makeup, because you pair bond every time there's sexual encounter, despite what the feminists tell you, what you find is that there's almost the intent, the premeditation, the preparation. There's so much emotional investment. The women who can go and do the same thing men do, we call them by the W word, or by the S word, or by the H word. They're professionals. And they're gone. They're lost. Most women cannot do that because most women cannot give equally to other men their hearts. One has to lead and the other has to be a follower. She has to love one person more than the other, which is why women have this dilemma of falling in love with someone else. Whereas a man can love his wife and he's nailing 10 women every other week. Why? And if you came to that man and said, Jane, the girl you bang every Monday at 2:30, just after lunch, she died yesterday. He would say, oh well. Now he will go to her funeral, if invited, and he will find her sister, and he will nail her sister and her best friend. No emotion. We're like dogs. We're like lions. The best way to understand men is to look at the wild, look at animals. And if you can have some compassion, sometimes pity on animals, and how that bull can hump the other and hump the other and hump the other and keep humping, then you understand actually men are animals. If you've had farms, then you understand this. If you have people who have farms, they will explain to you that you need one very, very good one, a stud, and he will handle all the other women in the farm. There is no emotion. Now when he's nailing the other woman, the sheep that had just got her feel doesn't complain. She just goes on with her business. I'm saying that to make a point, which is there are double standards that exist. Learn those standards. Don't try to make life fair and balance things. Understand those standards and use it to your advantage. And let me bring today's session to a close by saying the following. A lot of what I've shared today may not be necessarily what you want to hear. Keep two things in mind. Men and women are different. And there is much ado about nothing with regards to infidelity, cheating, and more. Now, in the session that follow, I'm going to talk about women. And I'm going to give you some advice on how to handle the whole concept of infidelity, either at the dating stage or relationship stage, because I have seen great relationships tossed away by women because of an act of, you might call it, pleasure on a man's part for 5-10 minutes with someone who he doesn't give an F about, doesn't know, doesn't care. And women throw away years and years of a history with a man. They break their families. They make their futures much harder. They dissolve a relationship. Why? Because on a drunken night, on a Friday evening, he was said to have inserted his penis inside something, somewhere, someone, for which he cannot even remember. The next session is going to be very, very heavy hitting, but I think it'll be of value to a lot of women. You have to learn how to be smart, how to be wise, how to be discerning, and therefore how to make the right choices with regards to infidelity and cheating. The exit strategy and the default exit strategy of walking away, that's silly, absolutely silly. You have to know how to make the right decisions when you're faced with such challenges. Now, I hope that's been useful.